Hello and welcome to revision tips for CIPS Level 3, Advanced Certificate in Procurement and Supply Operations. This is Module 4, Team Dynamics and Change, and it's Learning Outcome 1. And that's to know how the individuals can support the overall organisational success through procurement and supply. We're going to cover things like personal attributes that are required to support the overall success of an organisation, then look at the roles that staff play and the responsibilities they have in procurement. And then we'll look at the importance of liaising with our internal customers and other stakeholders. So everyone who works for an organisation is responsible for its success or failure. So let's consider how every staff member in supply and procurement has a part to play in ensuring their organisation succeeds. Different organisations have different definitions of success. Public sector may have a different view of success compared to that of the private sector organisations, or even the third sector organisations, whose goals may differ. So public sector aims to serve people and have enough money to do it effectively. Private sector aims to make a profit. Third sector aims to meet its objectives and cover the costs involved. Everybody needs some knowledge, but there's a couple of ways that you can gain knowledge. The first is personal knowledge, which is gained firsthand by observation, experience, education, or just your natural abilities. This can be done by watching and following people. This all gives you knowledge, like for example when you go to school or college. Group knowledge can be developed by group discussions, by listening to others and taking their opinions into account. Robert Lambert's theory on gaining knowledge contains 4 stages. The first is to capture the knowledge. This is in the teaching process, and you capture it through observations or experience. Then to curate it, which is to store it, ordering and filing the observations or experience somewhere in your mind. Crunch is to analyse and understand what's been presented to you. But finally, the fourth one is to contribute, which is to put the knowledge you've learned into action. Now, if an organisation is to succeed, the people within it must be able to continue to develop their personal knowledge. This will help them to adapt to change, take on new challenges, learn new systems within their business and develop new hard and soft skills. Hard skills are specific skills that have been taught. This will be things like learning to use a new computer system or gaining a professional qualification. The soft skills are skills that may be taught, but are more likely to develop with time and practice. So an example of soft skills would be teamworking and communication. But personal values also contribute to organisational success. And personal values are things that are important to an individual. They're formed from a person's beliefs and affect their attitudes, actions, behaviours and decisions. These personal values play a fundamental role in the work environment. If an individual's values don't match what the organisation has, it's unlikely that the partnership between the employee and the organisation will survive. Similarly, an organisation that values honesty, trust and professionalism is likely to treat its staff well. At the same time, it would expect staff to demonstrate the same values in their work. So let's have a look at some examples of positive personal values. Loyalty, perseverance, overcoming obstacles, respecting privacy, professionalism, just acting professional in your day-to-day work, having respect and being honest, which ultimately will build trust. Now, many organisations focus on CPD, which stands for Continued Professional Development. This is an ongoing process and to some extent happens naturally as people improve their personal knowledge by doing their jobs rather than having any formal training. But in order for us to do professional development, we're going to need to have some self-awareness and self-development. And self-awareness is an understanding of your personal values. What motivates you? What are your strengths and weaknesses? And then that can help you to identify areas for improvement. But due to the fact that individuals have different values, different levels of self-awareness, and undertake different amounts of personal development, the range of knowledge within an organisation is likely to be varied. Self-development is the process an individual takes to improve their knowledge and abilities. Now that can occur naturally over time, or individuals can engage in CPD activities. That could be work-based learning, which is on the job, or mentorship. Professional activities such as giving a presentation or attending a meeting. Formal education, like studying for a professional qualification. And self-direct learning, which is all to do with reading publications and attending trade show events. But there are lots of benefits to doing CPD, which you can see on the screen. It keeps your capabilities up to a required standard and your knowledge and skills, again, to the required standard. But the third one's really important to me, making sure that knowledge is up to date because change is inevitable. We can't rely on what we learned 10 years ago to do the job we do today. Teamwork, helping individuals to contribute within teams, helps them to be aware of current trends, and all of this will build the confidence of you as an individual. So the procurement process in a simplified circle here. Procurement is the whole process of buying products or services from identifying the need to satisfying the need. It's a strategic business function that's made up of things like determining our requirements. So specifications can help us determine our requirements, and that will either be a conformance or performance specification. Determining sources using perhaps Carter's 10Cs, Porter's forces. Selecting vendors based on their capacity, capability, credit rating. Placing orders, ensuring you satisfy the 5 rights: quantity, quality, price, place, and time. Monitoring the orders by using acknowledgements or expediting. Be aware of Battle of the Forms. Receiving goods, so checking them when they're received, making sure it corresponds to the delivery note. Verifying invoices, making sure everything tallies, and paying suppliers, a responsibility that the accounts team are responsible for. But you can see you're going to need different skills and different people to do all of these different roles. The aim of a well-functioning procurement department is to be strategic and an integral part of an organisation to drive cost efficiencies, to ensure that you're getting good value for money, considering the total cost of acquisition and not just the purchase cost, and to ensure that supply is continuous, but also to ensure we're buying ethically and sustainably, and to strive for continuous improvement by ensuring there's always a backup plan. Now, as a procurement professional, you need to understand the procurement and supply process and how you can contribute to its smooth running within your organisation. You should start to think about how your personal knowledge and values can be applied to your role. Because here again are the tasks in the procurement process by department or function, which show how procurement interact with other departments. Procurement teams can add value by seeking out further cost savings, better supplier relationships, and innovative systems such as new technology or software, which will make processes more efficient. Cost savings may not always be achievable, but there are other things a buyer can negotiate with to get a win-win outcome. But as is probably mentioned before, when you're looking at added value and whether you should be striving for a win-lose or a lose-win outcome, I think you need to ask yourself what's more important, the relationship with the supplier or the outcome of the negotiation. If you don't need an ongoing relationship with a supplier, then a kind of lose-win in your favour is better, or it's okay to use that approach. But if you value the ongoing relationship and the outcome, then it's much better to go for a win-win outcome. Now, procurement and supply are not the same thing. Supply is transactional. It's concerned with selling and often referred to as a supply chain. The supply chain is a network of individuals, organisations, technology, activities and resources that all work together to make sure the goods and services reach the customer. So you can see a sort of typical simple supply chain on the slide now. Raw materials are delivered to the manufacturer. The manufacturer produces components and delivers that to their main manufacturer. The manufacturer produces the main products, goes through distribution to retails, and the retail outlet sells it to the consumer. All organisations in the supply chain are reliant on the one in front of them or behind them. So any issues in the supply chain will essentially impact the entire chain. So backup plans are always needed. Organisations can fail to supply for a variety of reasons. They may go into liquidation or suffer supply chain problems themselves, experience a fire or a break-in, or a force majeure event, which is an act of God. But like all departments in organisations, a procurement department will have a structure of roles. Structures can be tall or flat, depending on the culture of your organisation. A flat structure has few or no levels of management. It typically requires workers to make decisions and be involved in running of the business. A tall or hierarchical structure is based on a pyramid approach. Everyone in the organisation reports to someone above them, except the person at the top. But even then, they are probably answerable to shareholders. A typical procurement department has a number of roles, such as a procurement and supply chain director. There could be buyers, purchase order administrators, supplier relationship managers, stock controllers, logistic operators. Now, the procurement and supply director is ultimately responsible for goods and services within 4 cost categories. You have fixed cost, variable costs, direct and indirect. The fixed costs don't vary with and are not dependent on the product, such as rent, permanent staff salaries. You'd have to pay them regardless of the volumes that you sold. And these are often known as indirects because they're not directly attributed to the production of a specific item. They're often referred to as overheads. The variable costs do vary in line with production. The more you sell, the more you buy. So when production increases, so will the variable costs. And these are often referred to as directs because they are directly attributed to the product or service. The supplier relationship manager is responsible for developing and maintaining supplier relationships. The role involves working closely with strategic suppliers to ensure a mutually beneficial relationship is formed. But it clearly will depend on the level of importance to your organisation. So on the screen you can see a version of the Kraujek matrix, which looks at financial risk and supply risk. The ones in the top right hand corner are the things that you spend lots of money on and that are really important to your organisation. So clearly your supplier relationship manager should be focusing most of their attention on that quadrant. On the leverage though, top left hand side, we do spend a lot of money on them, but they're probably one-off things and there's plenty of suppliers out there, so we can leverage those. Routine on the bottom left are things like stationery and cleaning materials, very routine, low cost, low impact. There's plenty of alternatives out there. And then the bottleneck products on the right hand side at the bottom Probably these are ones where there's a monopoly. You don't spend huge amounts of money, but the risk is high. So your supplier relationship manager should be focusing on the right-hand side, the strategic and the bottlenecks. An important responsibility for anyone working in procurement is to ensure they are compliant and follow the processes and procedures that have been set by your organisation. It is vital to learn the difference between a procedure and a process that's set by your organisation, but not everyone agrees on the definition. Members of staff need to communicate and advise colleagues within procurement as well as from other departments that they have responsibilities for purchasing. But our procurement professionals are the ones that are responsible for advising the colleagues about the processes and procedures. So a process is what you do, and a procedure is how you do it. Purpose of procedures and processes is to ensure efficiency, reduce the likelihood of errors, and ensure that you're complying with health and safety standards and that information is communicated to the relevant parties at the right time. So compliance really is just about following the rules that relate to the work that you do. There are some useful tools, theories and strategies that can help you along the way. So firstly, PESTLE at the top left-hand side considers external macro factors that could affect the business, politically, economically, socially, technologically, legally and environmentally. Top right-hand side, you've got Porter's 5 forces considering the microenvironment of your market, such as the power of the buyers and suppliers, new entrants to the market, but also to identify the level and strength of competition that it faces. Bottom right-hand side, you've got a SWOT analysis. This is used to assess a potential supplier, a change of quality, or a different number of products. It looks at the strengths, weaknesses, but also the opportunities and threats. Strengths and weaknesses are internal, opportunities and threats are external. And finally, bottom left, you have the Mendelow's stakeholder mapping matrix. They identify 4 types of stakeholders based on power and influence, but help you to understand what to do with them. High power, high interest are your key players. You must manage them closely. High power, low interest are usually your directors and managers. You need to keep them satisfied. High interest, low power need to be kept informed. Low power, low interest require minimal effort. Now, procurement professionals are often tasked with reducing cost in supply chains or sourcing better value goods or services. So using the total cost approach will consider all of the costs associated with procuring that good, not just the product or service price, which clearly the lower the better, but you do need to consider the other factors such as currency, exchange rate, which is really important when you're dealing with other currencies other than your home currency. Conversion errors can cost you a lot of money. The transport costs, because there are lots of methods such as Ex Works, free on board, free alongside, DDP. The maintenance cost, do check if an individual quote you've received has maintenance included. If not, you need to ensure you understand what that's going to cost. Warranty, which is essentially a promise to pay if something goes wrong or to replace parts. The environmental and ethical factors consider the impact on the environment and your organisation's reputation. But also the supplier's reputation. Does the supplier typically deliver good quality things on time? What about the order quantities and inventory they want you to hold? You need to balance the cost and the savings that you might achieve by buying lower volumes. Packaging, can the packaging be returned to the supplier? Can it be recycled? What about your payment terms? Do they want paying up front or are they willing to wait 30 days? The rebates, quality, does it match the specification? And the service levels like response times. All of this is known as the sort of total cost of ownership approach. When buying from suppliers, both in their own country and abroad, a buyer should take into consideration the costs of goods being transported from the supplier to the buying organisation. There are many terms used within freight, and a good buyer will want to get value for money by negotiating the most cost-effective terms for their organisation. So you can see here Incoterms 2010, they're reviewed every 10 years, so they're probably due to be renewed this year, 2020. They're negotiated by the International Chamber of Commerce, which means that if you're using an Incoterm, everybody understands their responsibilities. So X works, the buyer pays for all the transport. DDP, the seller pays for all the transport. They're the kind of two extremes. But the ones that start with the letter F get them to the port of arrival. And the ones that begin with the letter C tend to get it to the port, the Fs get it to the port of departure and the Cs get it to the port of arrival. But I do have another video on YouTube explaining Incoterms, so do have a look at that. It's good practice to communicate closely with your stakeholders, both inside and outside your organisation, to keep them informed and involved in decisions. But a stakeholder is a person or a group of people that have an interest in the organisation. They can either benefit from or be harmed by what you do. Equally, they can be internal, connected to you in some way, or truly external. Your external stakeholders are people like the local community, the government, the media. Your connected ones have a commercial or contractual relationship. They're like your customers and suppliers. But internally, these are people that work within your organisation, such as the owners and the staff. Focusing on internal customers, an internal customer is someone within the business who interacts with a fellow employee, the person who uses the washrooms where a buyer is responsible for purchasing the cleaning materials. And the buyer needs to communicate with these people so that they know how much notice is needed to order replenishment stock in time. If they're not aware of the lead times, they may expect orders to be received the following day. If this doesn't happen, then the washrooms could be out of service with no toilet paper or hand soap. So serving stakeholders inefficiently can have an impact on your organisation. So do make sure you identify who your stakeholders are, liaise with them to find out how you can work well together. And then act on their requisitions promptly and keep them informed. You don't know what impact a delay could have. In keeping with offering efficient and effective services to your internal stakeholders, procurement professionals need to advise colleagues of the 5 rights. So we're looking for the right quantity, right quality, at the right place, at the right price, and also at the right time. So the questions you need to ask is how many or how much is needed? What do they need to do? How urgently is it needed? Where is delivery going to? What's the budget? Examples of external roles in procurement include your suppliers, your manufacturers, the distributors, but also authorities and regulatory bodies who set up requirements and standards that must be met and followed, but nonetheless your customer. They're the ones that are going to buy your products or services. So one of the things procurement could do to get better value for money is to aim to reduce the input cost and reduce waste with lean thinking. So Tashio Ono defines 7 types of waste that describe all activity that add cost but no value. A process adds value by producing goods or producing services that a customer will pay for. A process consumes resources and waste occurs when more resources are consumed than is necessary to produce those goods or provide the services that the customer wants. So these 7 wastes are categories of underproductive manufacturing or production practices that was identified by Tashio Ono, who was the father of the Toyota production system. And we remember this using the name Tim Wood. So the first three letters, TIM, transport, unnecessary movement of products and materials. Inventory, excess products being held that you don't need. And motion, unnecessary movements by people walking to get to things. The wood is waiting, overproduction, overprocessing and defects. So waiting is time wasted when you're waiting for the next step to happen. Overproduction is producing more than's needed before it's needed. Overprocessing, doing more work or higher quality than the customer requires. And defects, efforts caused by rework, scrap and incorrect information. Thank you for watching.